Hey, Rob from Order42 here, and today, Zack Snyder's Justice League is here. It's finally here. After years of thinking about it, talking about it, speculating about it, all of those things. I mean, gosh, I know we talked about it a ton on this channel, and I've only been doing this for about a year now. So yeah, it's been something that has been on our mind, and we finally get to take it in. So yeah, I'm really, really excited about it. And in this review, hopefully I get to bring a different perspective, some things that I've learned while working on a movie, and just kind of looking at how, how did this thing actually start? And then where could it have gone? So yeah, lots of stuff. But without further ado, let's just get into it. So as we know, the original cut of Justice League that came out in 2017, it was, it still said directed by Zack Snyder in the credits, but yeah, we kind of all know the story that Joss Whedon was brought in after the untimely death of Zack Snyder's daughter Autumn to basically come in and do rewrites and kind of take this 4-hour epic and make it around 2 hours. There's got to be a ton of drama surrounding this thing. There's got to be all kinds of stories about, this is what DC wanted, this is what Warner wanted, this is what Zack wanted, and then eventually what ended up happening with that original theatrical cut. You've got people who create art, right? Artists, directors, writers, all of these creatives, right? Versus these people that are really business people, right? That's what they do. It's their job to take this thing, market it, and try to make a profit off of it. So it's two different mindsets, and it's very rare that you have somebody that's really creative go into this business side, or vice versa. It's usually one or the other. And when you have that, you have different goals in mind, right? And I think Zack Snyder in this case, he had a story that he wanted to tell. He had something that was this huge story. And because he wasn't given multiple movies to do it, he really wanted to try to do everything right here in this 4-hour crazy package, right? But then you had the executives, these people that sign the checks. They're in charge ultimately, right? And it's their job to try to make as much money as possible from it. And a 4-hour movie, you put that in a theater, nobody's going to go, and you're automatically putting a ceiling on how much money you can make because it's so long, because you can only play the movie a few times a day versus, if you have a 2-hour movie, well, you can make that much more money because there's more showings throughout the day. It's a strange balance, right? Between trying to really be creative and trying to make money. And honestly, that's what the studios are all about, really. The studios are about taking this thing, squeezing as much as they can out of it, right? Spend as little money as possible and try to maximize their profit. That's what the studios are best at. It's what they do. It's just interesting when those two sides, go head to head, and you end up getting Justice League 2017. When you think about a movie has to get made, right? You have to have a script. So how long was this original script? Because we got a 240-minute movie out of it. How long was the script? Was it actually, was it 4.5 hours worth of footage? I mean, how much was cut out of what we eventually got with the Snyder Cut? We may never know. Warner Brothers felt like they were behind, right? They wanted a Justice League, Avengers-style Justice League. That's what they wanted, right? That's what they felt that they had been building toward this whole time. So they said, well, we want you to introduce all these characters and bring the Justice League into fruition. That's what we want. We want the Justice League. Give us the Justice League. But then Snyder and Chris Terrio, go off and they write this, incredibly epic script with so much content in it, so many characters. It was going to be bloated no matter what because there's just so much content in it. The biggest single problem with this movie as a whole, if you really want to look at it critically, story, characters, all those things, right? You have to look at it and say, this is just too much for one sitting. I honestly think that this is one of those situations where it really could have been split into 2 or 3 movies. And I keep thinking about how dramatically, how it would have been to have a movie where Superman is a non-entity. He's completely out of it for the whole movie. And you have to live with that fact, and how much more satisfying it would have been when he does eventually return. So that's one of those things. It's a strange thing. It's a lack of patience. To me, this is all about the characters. I mean, yeah, there's some extra plot points and things like that, but for me, it's all about the characters. And I think that they are allowed to breathe in this cut more than they ever have. And it's one of those things that I just always value when it comes to movies, is when you can take that time to learn what makes a character tick. I think one of the characters that benefited the most from this extra time was the Flash. I mean, I gotta say, I did not enjoy the character of the Flash back in the Justice League, right? He was too goofy and too weird, and it just didn't work for me. But in this cut, he's much more sure of himself. I feel like Ezra Miller was allowed to give their all to this part. It's such a good thing to see. When someone's able to make a character live and breathe, I mean, that's really, really satisfying. And I just really enjoyed how great the Flash was in this movie. And Cyborg, oh my gosh. Look, I just watched the Justice League, right, the other day, just to kind of, re-familiarize myself with the story and what they were working from, And I felt like, even though I remember the first time I watched it, didn't feel like a very important character because of all of the drama surrounding Ray Fisher, I was really kind of paying attention to the character and really kind of trying to see what Ray was bringing to the part. And I really enjoyed what he did in the Whedon version of Justice League. But here his whole story is so much more satisfying. I mean, a lot of people have said that he's the heart of the story. And, I have to agree. There's so much that he brings to not just the driving of the plot, but his actual arc in the movie. His character arc is so well done here. And I have to say, Ray Fisher is someone that I really, really, really hope that he gets the opportunities that he deserves from this, because I think his work here is stellar. For the most part, I would say that Wonder Woman, Superman, and Aquaman, their character arcs really stay pretty well intact. I mean, there's not a whole lot of change there. The only thing that I will say, and it was probably my favorite scene from the Whedon cut of Justice League, is when Momoa is, mistakenly sitting on the lasso of truth. If you've seen the movie, you know exactly what I'm talking about. It's a fun little moment and a chance for Jason Momoa to be fun, and funny, because he's very, very serious in this movie. I mean, the character of Aquaman is very serious, but I really did enjoy that scene and was a little disappointed that it wasn't there, but it doesn't fit the tone of how that movie, how the Snyder cut was flowing from, during that part. So I understand why it was cut, and of course it wasn't Snyder's. So of course he's not going to use it, but I kind of miss that. Now, many people, who know me know that I'm a huge fan of Batman. So to see in the Snyder cut the campiness sort of taken out, and he's a little more serious, I really, really enjoyed that. I love the fact that he was just more awesome and less campy. I don't know how else to say it. It was so much better than the Whedon cut. I guess that's one of the reasons why I've always loved Batman, is because Batman is just a normal guy, right? He's just a normal guy with money. And he can create all of these wonderful toys, and that's what makes him special. And really, when you talk about character in any kind of fashion, right? Doesn't matter what character it is. You create the character, and in writing the story, you're creating problems for that character to be able to solve or rise above, right? That's what an arc is. And for Batman, his arc was always overcoming whatever was in front of him. But if you think about it from a superhero point of view, it's like with Superman, it's well, how are they going to use kryptonite in his story? Or how are they going to use the people that he loves in a way that he can't use his powers? Or, so that's the weird thing. It's like, for me, Batman was always a more interesting dynamic character wise. Is how is he going to solve this? It's like, because he's the world's greatest detective, right? That's what I always loved about Batman. And to see him be really the weakest character of all in this movie, it's one of the things that I've never really cared for about the Justice League in general. I hope that makes sense. The thing about the movie story wise and all that, it definitely, it's for 4 hours. Yeah, you're gonna have time to plot the story differently, right? And sort of set up things that are gonna pay off later. One of the major additions I think in this movie is I always want to call him Miles Dyson, but his name's Joe Morton. Great character actor. He was in Terminator 2, Eureka, the show Eureka, if you know who I'm talking about. But he plays Silas, right? And his character as Cyborg's dad, Victor's dad, I guess you could say. There's a lot more with him, and a lot more with the, you know, what he's working on and how things work with the three cubes of doom, whatever they're called. Whatever. I think a worthwhile addition, but it was almost like every time they cut over to him, it was kind of like, let's get back to the heroes, But it is one of those things that, it adds to the story, especially the drama toward the end, if you know what I'm saying. With all that being said, I feel like with a 4 hour runtime, there's going to be scenes that may not feel exactly important, especially to the main storyline and sort of this momentum that you're trying to achieve. I think any good editor will tell you that some of their favorite scenes, if every movie they've ever worked on, there's scenes that get cut out that are so good on their own, but they just don't fit with the momentum of the story being told, the major story. And that's kind of one of those, it's one of those things that you have to do as an editor, is you have to figure out what's important for what you're trying to get across. And if something works on its own but doesn't work in the whole, you lose it. And I feel like there's a few moments, for sure, that could have been cut down a little bit. And as much as I enjoyed this whole thing, right, and enjoyed the way that it flowed and all that stuff, it's kind of a sit back and relax and just let's leisurely take our journey through this story. But I just feel like it could have been cut out to save some time, for sure. So this sort of emulates the IMAX framing. I mean, it's not perfect. I mean, there's some extra little, a black area up there and down below, but for the most part, this is 4:3, right? This is kind of what our old TVs used to look like prior to the 16:9 TVs that are prevalent today. But yeah, so typical to what you usually see on this channel. Yeah, you can see some extra stuff up here and maybe some extra stuff down here, but for the most part, it's not much different. In fact, yeah. So yeah, I mean, it's kind of one of those things. It's kind of personal preference, isn't it? So aspect ratio is one of those things that just it's basically comes down to taste, right? Subjective taste, And there was, watching this, I could say that there's definitely some scenes where it benefited from the taller ratio, but at the same time, I think I've made it pretty clear that I prefer the wider format. So I kind of hope they do that for the 4K. I mean, here's hoping. Probably the single weirdest thing in the movie is the epilogue. And I'm not going to go into any kind of spoilers or anything like that, especially for those who haven't had the chance to see Zack Snyder's Justice League yet. But the epilogue does a lot of setting up for things that probably aren't coming. And that's strange to me. I wonder how much of that was added on, recently, to kind of, it's almost like a slight jab to Warner Brothers for, look, this is what you could have had. That's kind of how it felt to me. It didn't feel like it was really part of this story, and I guess that's part of my problem with it. I still, like I said, I enjoyed it, but it still felt like it was definitely tacked on and it wasn't part of the main throughput of the story. And I will also say that throughout the movie, the movie's just, it's much more violent. You know, there are scenes where there's a brutality that is a little like, oh, okay. Oh, you're going there. Okay. I don't know if that's necessary. Like, I felt a little bit of it was a little, I guess, maybe indulgent, you know, and you know, you would think that in a lot of ways, you know, stories like this, like comic book stories in general, there's going to be violence, and there's sometimes when somebody takes a hit and you're kind of like, yeah, that probably would have broken his head, you know, or snapped his neck or something. Yes, you think that, but you kind of move on with the idea that this is a comic book. You know, it's not meant to be ultra violent. There's some really violent stuff in the movie that was kind of like, oh, okay. I mean, the movie is rated R, right? This cut is rated R, but it still was kind of like, wow, that was kind of brutal. And then there are a couple of, I would say, unnecessary F words in the movie. It just doesn't fit the tone of kind of what they're telling. I mean, at least in my opinion, it just felt a little HBO-y, I guess you could say. Now, when it comes to the good, I think if you've already seen the original Whedon cut, I think you could probably agree that that pretty much anything would probably be an improvement. But I have to say, Superman's introduction to the fight. Okay, I'm just gonna say that when he makes his appearance, it moved me in a way that I was very surprised by. Like, I was actually almost moved to tears in a way. And I don't know if it was the combination of the visuals and the music. I'm not sure. But I have to give credit for that, because that's one of those things that's, to me, it's hard to do. You know, I've talked many times in the past about my sort of, I guess it's an ease, you know, for me to cry in a movie. But this was a surprise to me, because it was like, wow, that was actually really powerful, and I really enjoyed that. It's the first time, I think, ever that I can think of where the story of the Justice League really hit home for me and really made me care. Because I think the Whedon cut was kind of like, yeah, that was the thing. I will say, I didn't hate that cut. I just wasn't that big of a fan. It was fine. And I feel like if it was anything other than stellar, then it was already kind of a failure, you know, especially when you're comparing things to Marvel, which is unfair, right? But I still felt like this was, I have to say, it's an achievement. You know, it's an achievement in storytelling. It's an achievement in world building, and what it almost gives you an idea of, this is what we could have gotten. This is what we could have had if only they would have taken the time to put the pieces in the right place at the right time. Take your time with storytelling. We could have had something amazing. I feel like this is nothing less than absolute vindication for the fans. I mean, especially those who did the positive things, right? The things that really just, it brought this project back from the dead. I mean, there's no way Warner Brothers would have gone back to Snyder in any case and said, hey, you know, do you want to, you know, I don't know, finish your movie? It just wouldn't have happened without that persistence, without that absolute adoration from fans to get this thing off the ground. It's really an amazing feat when you think about it, and not to underplay the amount of money that was raised by the Release the Snyder Cut fans for suicide prevention, you know, in the name of Autumn, right? Zack Snyder's daughter. I mean, I found that to be really, really moving. And I mean, gosh, I think more fandoms could take a look at that and say, you know, maybe we could do that too. But it's also absolute vindication for Zack Snyder and his vision. That it's still baffling to me that this is even a thing, right? That even happened, because it's so unprecedented in the history of movie making, in studios, whatever. There's no way that somebody could be removed from a project and then years later they say, hey, you want to come finish the movie that you were making for us? It just doesn't happen. You know, it's literally like as if Disney went to Lord and Miller, right? The original directors of Solo, and said, hey, do you want to come back and maybe finish your vision of that movie? There's no way. It just wouldn't happen. And in a lot of places, I would say that it shouldn't happen. But this was one of those situations where it's just a perfect storm of, persistence and love. I will say that I've been critical of Zack Snyder in the past, and I would even say dismissive of Zack Snyder in the past. But I can't deny the passion that it took to make this movie, to make this thing happen, and to give the fans what they wanted. I mean, I've seen enough from him now, I think, that I feel differently. And I really, really appreciate his vision and what he was trying to do. And on top of that, I'm really looking forward to Army of the Dead now. You know, I'm really looking forward to seeing what he does next. You know, with all of this in mind, I've heard that there's talk that he's going to be doing a much smaller project. You know, much smaller budgets. You know, I'm interested in whatever he does, and the thing is, I gotta say, I'm kind of a fan of Zack Snyder now. If I was to give this a rating, I would probably have to give it somewhere in between Batman vs. Superman and Man of Steel, because Man of Steel is my favorite of the entire DCEU. And I gotta say, it's a lot of it comes from Hans Zimmer. I mean, there's the combination of his music with Henry Cavill and the whole, I just really, really enjoy that movie. But Batman vs. Superman, it's got its problems, right? So I would say Man of Steel is probably like I almost want to say a 3.5, a 3.5 stars out of 4, but I kind of feel like that's a bit too high because there are problems with that movie. So I'm gonna knock that down to a 3.25 out of 4. Batman vs. Superman, there's a lot of things I enjoy about it, but a lot of problems. I would probably give that like a 2.75. So that puts Justice League right in the middle there at 3 stars. And that's a good rating for me. I mean, that's a recommended rating. So yeah, I really think that overall, Zack Snyder's Justice League is it's a triumph. It's a triumph of perseverance and passion, I think. And I think that in itself, it's to be commended. But the movie actually ended up I really enjoyed it. Oh, and in case you're wondering, Joss Whedon's Justice League, I'd probably give that like 2.25 out of 4. So yeah. So Zack Snyder's Justice League, it's done. It's out, and I've reviewed it now. So wow. I mean, it's an amazing journey. I'm curious what you all think about it. I mean, were you excited when they announced it? Were you excited in the lead up to it? Have you watched it yet? What do you think of it? Let me know down below, and we'll discuss it. So thank you all so much for watching, and we'll see you on the next one.